Okay, members, it's now 5 past. With your permission, can we start the meeting, please? Anybody, any objections to that? Right. Okay, as I say, thank you very much for attending today. I'd just like, before we start, I'd like to formally welcome Chief Inspector Paul Cameron. Paul took off Chief Inspector Riley, who's moved on to other things, and also I'd like to welcome Chief Superintendent David Duncan. David replaces Alan Murray, who has just recently retired. So a very warm welcome to Inverclyde to both of you, and we look forward to working with you over the next few years or so. I would also like to welcome Chief Inspector Louise Harvey. Louise is here to speak on agenda item number 5. And can I just remind everybody with the usual procedure, if you wish to speak, please intimate that in the chat box, and also if you could keep your microphones on mute at all times other than that. And Jim, I hear you're online. I'll try to come to you first as we go through the agenda, and I'm sure maybe Sharon or Diane will keep me right if I forget to do that. So without further ado, can I ask Diane, do we have any apologies, substitutions or declarations of interest?
We have no apologies for absence intimated. Are there any declarations of interest?
Okay, thanks for that. Diane, okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which will be the Police Scotland Performance Report. And Paul or David, one of you take us through this.
Thanks, convener, and thanks for the warm welcome, good afternoon, councillors, colleagues. I'll kind of introduce it, and then I'll probably hand over to Paul just to give you a flavour of some of the kind of local detail. But we should all have the kind of infographic report that we submitted. In general terms, I suppose across the piece we're seeing a reduction in crime in general across the piece, and that is probably due in part to the COVID situation, particularly in terms of certain types of crime. The good news is we've seen a significant reduction in crimes of violence by 20%, which is significant, and that means 3 fewer attempted murders, 9 fewer serious assaults, 7 fewer robberies. And detection rate is slightly down in that from the previous year. 42% of Group 1 crime occurred within private households, and that's matched by an increase in our proactivity. So we've seen an increase of almost 8% in the previous year for weapon offences that are detected by police proactive activity. In terms of acquisitive crime, we've obviously seen shoplifting down, which is no surprise to any of you on the page. With a detection rate where we have seen those crimes committed increased, and an increase in house breaking attempts, but we've seen a reduction in domestic house breaking, so it's mainly been commercial or sheds.
Paul, David, sorry, David, you're very faint. Could you maybe adjust your microphone a wee bit? You're quite faint. We can't hear you very well.
All right, okay. I'll try. I'll try and speak up. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's better, David. Yeah, it's quite faint. Thanks.
Sorry, I need just to direct my voice towards the microphone. Okay, so in terms of acquisitive crime, as I said, shoplifting's down, housebreaking slightly up, motor vehicle crime has increased by 20%, with the highest proportion of crimes that's insecure vehicles. So we're doing some work around advice to members of the public about securing vehicles there, and the detection rate is 42%, which is like a significant increase on the previous year's detection rate, which was 29.6. In terms of public protection, reported sexual crimes have decreased by 30.8% in the previous years, and the detection rate for sexual crime is up by 61%, up from 49%, so another significant increase. Significantly, 72% of sexual crime occurred in dwelling houses, which is up by 12% on the 60% noted in the previous year. Recorded rate and attempted rate rose by 10%, from 20 crimes in the previous year to 22 currently, and again the detection rate from that has doubled, effectively. Some great work from DCI Harvey's team, who's on the call. In terms of the demographics of that, a quarter, or nearly a quarter of the sexual crimes reported were against young people under the age of 16 years, and I think again we'll use a bit of detail later on in the agenda around work in that area. It's also important to understand within those statistics recency. So 42% of reported sexual crimes were classified as non-recent. A third of those non-recent crimes targeted victims under 16 years. Meanwhile, 21% of the sexual crimes were actually cyber-enabled, and we're seeing an increase cyber-related or enabled crime through the COVID pandemic. In terms of missing persons, there's been 33 missing persons reports in Inverclyde. That's an increase of 64%. The number of young people going missing from children's homes fell from 28 last year to 5 in the current year. 79% of missing persons were traced within 24 hours. So again, we do put a lot of effort into trying to trace missing persons as quickly as possible, and we use a prioritisation risk assessment matrix for that also. In terms of the abuse, 609 were recorded year to date, down by 4.1% previous year, and those translated into 349 domestic crimes, and that's 7.2% below the previous year's volume, so relatively stable, but we are keeping an eye on it, particularly given the COVID situation and easing of lockdown. We'll come into a bit more detail, I think, later in the agenda about complaints about the police. But 33 complaints were received about the police for the reporting period, and that is an equation of 21.9 complaints per 10,000 police incidents. In terms of major crime and terrorism, serious organised crime and CT remains priorities for the division. For organised crime, there are still 2 serious organised crime groups being managed within Renfrewshire and Inverclyde division, and one of those predominantly impacts on Inverclyde. And again, I'll hand over to Paul shortly just to give you an update on activity around that. In terms of drug supply, there's been 38 detections of drug supply, production and cultivation offences.
Excuse me, David. Sorry to interrupt again, please, but can I just ask everybody to please make sure your microphones are on mute? We are getting some feedback here. If you could please keep an eye on that. Thank you very much. Sorry, David, carry on.
Not a problem. Thanks. Yeah, drug supply, we get 10 fewer detected offences based on the previous year. However, the seizures do include diamorphine, crack cocaine, herbal cannabis, and significantly tizolam, which is an increasing issue that we're seeing across Scotland, and I know it's a particular issue in the local area, and a drug that is featuring a lot in drug-related deaths. In terms of cybercrime, as I've mentioned, 102 crimes so far in the Inverclyde area have been designated as cybercrimes, and that's by application and assessment through a cybercrime marker. And a significant proportion of these are financially related, and that relates to fraud, phishing, and internet order crime. So we're seeing that expand across the board, across the whole of Scotland, and in fact the UK and probably internationally. In terms of road safety and road crime, we've had 2 road fatalities, unfortunately, within the reporting period, and that's up by 1 on the previous year. However, we have seen serious road injuries fall by 66%, slight injuries falling by 77%, a total of 17, and no children have been killed or seriously injured on Inverclyde's roads year to date. So overall, offences relating to vehicles fell slightly in the previous year, 0.1%, and we have seen an increase in recorded drink or drug driving offences, which is 63.3%. Also, 66.7% disqualified driving. Licensing offences are at 18%, and no insurance offences at 66.7%. So that kind of gives the kind of statistical flavour. I'd probably just ask Chief Inspector Paul Cameron to just give you a flavour of some of the kind of context for that, including taser, some of the stuff about fire attacks and robbery, etc. So I'll just hand over to you just now, Paul, and I'll meet myself. Thank you.
Okay, So just a couple of things following up from what the Chief Superintendent was saying there. So Group 1 crimes of violence, the 20.2% reduction, what that actually means is 23 fewer victims have been in Inverclyde. So rather than just focus on the percentage, the actual numbers, 23 individuals or less. The attempt murders, whilst it's a 33% reduction in the attempt murders, what I will say is in terms of Operation Tail, which for anyone that doesn't know is the fire bombings that had taken place in Inverclyde over the last few months. So we're in a good position with that in terms of the inquiry. So there's been 11 arrests, and the arrests are pretty much for attempt murder. So it's very serious charges that have been libelled against these individuals, most of whom are in prison on remand at the moment. And we are following up a number of other inquiries where up to 3 people at the moment will also be getting charged with conspiracy to murder. So obviously the next time I'll give you an update on that. So, but that's been, and I'm not going to underestimate what's happened here. This has been a fantastic police inquiry that's resulted in a significant number of individuals being arrested for very, very serious charges and who are currently on remand. So that's a good position where we are with that. In terms of the serious assaults, the 15% reduction, again, just to emphasise that that's 9 fewer victims in Inverclyde, so that's a good position for us. In the robbery, 35% reduction, that's 7 fewer victims, so it's adding up all the time. In common assaults, 3.6%, that's 17 less victims in the reporting period based against this time last year. Domestic abuse, we're seeing a 4.1% reduction in the number of domestic abuse calls that we are attending. I have double checked that because we were worried about COVID and the impact that might have. And actually that's a picture across Scotland. So we are in line with what's happening across Scotland. So I'm quite happy that picture is a true reflection of what's happening. In terms of hate crime, we're seeing a 6.8% detection in hate crime. It's went from 68.9% last year to 75.7% this year. Whilst 100% is what we're aiming for, 75% is actually pretty good when you measure it against the rest of Scotland. I would say we're right up there as probably being one of the best in terms of percentage clear-ups for across Scotland, so that's good. And there is a daily focus on hate crime, so that's paying dividends. In terms of drugs, so the Chief Superintendent in this report did comment that it's a 20.8% reduction in recorded drug supply. What I will do is just put a wee bit of context into that. So it's shown as 38 cases at the moment. However, that is definitely going to increase. There's 10 cases currently sitting with a lab. Unfortunately, the lab takes a bit of time for them to come back to us. I am very confident that they will come back to us with a further 10 charges that we'll be liable against people for concerning the supply of drugs. So we are on track with that. In fact, we are ahead at the moment. Just a couple of things around about the drugs. For people who don't know, we obviously had the bingo hall situation in Brown Street, which was the second largest cannabis cultivation that Inverclyde has ever seen. And it worked out at £600,000 street value in drugs. We also carried out an operation at Oxford Road, which is in the Larkfield area. Most people will know we've had difficulties up there with drug dealing. We had an organised approach to that based on intelligence, and the day of action resulted in £250,000 worth of drugs being seized and £12,700 in cash being seized under the Proceeds of Crimes Act. That was a fantastic result, which the public definitely helped us with the intelligence side of things on that. So that was really good. And the outcome of that was 5 arrests. So 5 persons were charged with that. And obviously quite a substantial haul of drugs were taken off the streets. We then followed that up with a further operation at Redpole Place in Greenock. And that happened on the 20th of January this year. And from that drugs warrant turn, we recovered £90,000 worth of drugs. It's 171,000 etizolam tablets. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation of it, but basically illegal tablets. So 171,000 of those tablets that we seized. And again, there was a number of arrests that took place with that. And we'll just quickly go over, see if there's anything else here that I've missed. Consumption of alcohol in a public designated place. We have seen a 17.4% increase in that. And we'll continue to monitor that in terms of our COVID compliance as well. And I think that's pretty much all I would add to what the Chief Superintendent has said. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about anything that's happened in Inverclyde.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, gentlemen. I'm going to come to Councillor MacLeod on the phone first, and then it's Councillor Moran and Councillor Murphy. Jim, do you have any questions for Police Scotland?
Yes, thanks, Tommy. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Jim, carry on.
Yeah, good, thanks. Can I thank the police for the report? I think it's very positive overall. We're seeing a fair number of crimes across the board being reduced, and I think that's a very positive story. And just like to congratulate the police and all their endeavours in ensuring that crime is down so low. However, there are one or two areas. One of the things that perturbed me, and I think I said this at the last Police and Fire Scrutiny Committee, is I'm very concerned about the attacks on the police and other emergency services. I think that's a scandal, particularly during the pandemic, which makes it even worse. So I do hope that our courts are listening and that the sheriffs are listening, and that the appropriate sentences are handed out to people when they're apprehended for any of those sort of assaults and crimes. I've got two or three questions. First question, you talked about complaints against the police. I just wonder what the nature of some of those complaints are about. My second question is about cybercrime. Sadly, we're seeing more and more of this occurring. It's quite a horrible thing. When I've asked council officials about this in the past, they sort of intimated that a lot of these crimes seem to be coming from Eastern Europe. So can I ask the police if it's their experience as well that most of these crimes are coming from Eastern Europe, or are we seeing quite a lot coming from Scotland and the UK as well? And if so, is that increasing in number? And my last question is, I see that obviously there was patrols and checks on licensed premises, particularly over the Christmas period, and I just wondered, did all licensed premises were inspected? Did they all comply with the COVID restrictions? So that's my three questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Jim. Paul?
So I'll try my best to answer as much of them as I can. So in terms of the assaults on emergency workers, I absolutely totally agree with you on that. We've experienced, of all assaults, common assaults, 30% of all assaults that's happened in Inverclyde has been on emergency workers, which is completely unacceptable. You've probably seen many newspapers every day, not every day, you've seen many papers on every occasion where an emergency worker has been assaulted, condemning it, because it's just unacceptable, and we will get that message out there. We'll just keep continuing to do that. In terms of the complaints, so I've had a look at the complaint side of things. So to give you a bit of reassurance on about complaints, so my background is professional standards, so I have came from a complaints background, so I suppose I'm speaking from a bit of experience on this. So we had 59 on-duty allegations, which are 33 complaints. So a complaint can consist of a number of allegations in those. 17 of those complaints were about quality of service. Now that could be things like a complainer not being updated on time, an appointment not being met, an incivility. Maybe the officer wasn't as polite as we would have expected. But all the complaints are each area. Well, me as the area commander for Inverclyde, every complaint's fully investigated by an independent inspector to it. I get the report, and then I determine the outcome if we're going to uphold or not uphold a complaint, and a final letter is sent to the complainer on the basis of that inquiry that's taking place. We do uphold complaints. I've upheld one today, and there's others where we have insufficient evidence to uphold. The complainer also has a further follow-on from a completely independent perspective. So just because I say I don't uphold a complaint, that's not the end of the story. If the complainer's not happy with that, they have 3 months in which they can take that to PERC, and then PERC will then review the full investigation. So it's quite a rigorous process that we go through. I've reviewed the complaints that we get here in Inverclyde. As the area commander, I am not concerned. It's not great when you get complaints. However, I also do welcome complaints, because if the service has fallen short, it gives me an opportunity to fix it. So in terms of the complaints, that's where we are at the moment. The licensed premises, yeah, we did do inspections over the festive period, and I have to say that the licensed trade, by and large, have been completely compliant with what we've asked them to do. There is one issue that's ongoing, which I believe the council are looking at for one of the premises. It's not a police matter at this time, but other than that, I'm perfectly happy with the licensed premises. And I don't know if Mr. Duncan wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think the other question was around cyber-related crime. So I suppose without going into specific countries, what we are seeing as a trend is there are a lot of crime reports which are raised that affect victims in this area that actually emanate from overseas, and that adds an additional complexity to the inquiries and what we can do legally to address those. So I don't have the detail about specific areas, but I can say that we do see it as a global phenomenon, cybercrime.
And I suppose Tommy, the only other thing I would add on that is I can confirm that Inverclyde does have its own cyber kiosk as well, so that does help us and speed things up. It's a fantastic development from Police Scotland. I've got one. It's nice and shiny, and I'm keeping it good, because it's been long overdue for us. So I'm delighted to say we've got that.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul.
Tommy, can I just ask, just as a quick follow up on two things. Thank you very much for the answers, first of all. But when it came to complaints, I just wondered if you could even give us a flavour of some of the nature of these complaints, if that's possible at all. And the other thing about cybercrime, are we still obviously in full communication with police forces in Europe, particularly now that we're official out of the EU? And do you anticipate that could have any effect with trying to track down some of these cyber criminals in Eastern Europe? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jim. I can answer your first question. It comes up in the agenda item number 4, I think, and it's something where officers will be discussing with the police to expand the level of information we get on complaints, and you'll probably see the report changing over the next couple of meetings. So that's something we're actively looking at and in discussion with Police Scotland on. So we'll be more information coming back to us, which will allow the board to scrutinise the police and question them on that. Paul, on cybercrime?
I might pass to Mr. Duncan. I think he's got more knowledge on that than me, I think.
Okay, thanks. David?
Yeah, thanks. I can confirm that we do maintain relationships with the international policing community, and cyber-related crime is part of that relationship.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, David. Okay, thanks for them questions, Jim. Can we move on to Councillor Moran, followed by Councillor Murphy?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, Robert, loud and clear.
Right, thanks, Tommy. My question, obviously, Jim covered some of it, but my question to the police, and suppose Mr. McNabb might be asked to help here, is there's no mention of the COVID crime. Are you investigating with the COVID? Certainly, I have brought myself about incoming workers in Inverclyde who are appearing in Inverclyde out of the blue, and we don't know where they've came from, if they've been had any test to say they're COVID free, or where they're going to live, or who they're going to stay with, or if they've got a GP or anything like that. So I'll ask the police, are you doing any investigations on these individuals who have turned up out of the blue, or is it up to the local authority and Mr. McNabb? Because certainly my constituents have raised the complaints to me, and I have raised them. So I've asked the police, are you investigating any of these breaches, serious breaches of the COVID regulations?
Okay, Paul.
Yeah, so I was trying to find the figures there for the COVID thing. I will get them in a minute. It's just not coming up on my screen. Yeah, so pretty much whenever we get individuals who are out with the area, so we are reporting these individuals, and we've reported quite a few. I mean, so like in the last 24 hours, our officers here have issued 12 fixed penalty tickets to individuals for breaching COVID legislation, and in fact, in the last month, we're probably equated to about 23% of all COVID tickets going back to the beginning of this crisis that we've issued. So we have got to a stage where individuals who come to our attention, who clearly undertaking the advice that the government has given them, we do follow the 4 E's, where we go through the education phase, and enforcement being the last option. We are getting to that stage quicker with some individuals because they've come to our attention, some of whom are on their second or third tickets, and the individuals who have came travelling into Inverclyde. It happened pretty much at the beginning of the crisis, when Inverclyde was on a lower tier than other people. We still get it. It doesn't happen that often, but it is happening, and we will enforce the legislation where necessary.
Thanks, Mr. Campbell, but I'm not asking them individually. I'm not about companies. Companies are bringing people into this area. Are you going to visit these companies and tell them that they're breaking the law? And will these companies be facing any consequences or actions? Individuals concerned. I'm talking to companies that's actively breaking the law and bring people in here. Yeah,
so I know what you're talking about there, and I know that there is exemptions under the coronavirus legislation that allows certain key workers and certain skilled workers to come into the area, and it's if the employer can demonstrate that that's a requirement. There is guidance in the legislation that allows that. So we will look at that, and if the legislation doesn't permit them to do that, then we will absolutely be, and it will either be ourselves or we'll do it and joint with the council.
Okay, thanks. Can we move on to Councillor Murphy, followed by Councillor Crowder and then Councillor Jackson?
Thank you, Chair. My question is around the number of under-16s that make up the victims of sexual crimes. It's terrible that we have any sexual crimes being committed within the area, both past and present. I was just wondering, of those under-16-year-olds, is this historic sexual incidents, or is this something that's came out throughout COVID, like people being abused in their homes or school or wherever?
Okay, thanks, Natasha. We'll probably cover that maybe a bit later on in Chief Inspector Hardy, but Paul, do you have anything to add at the moment?
To be honest with you, I would probably, for that type of question, I would probably ask our PPU unit before I could give an answer, because I'm not 100% on it.
If I could get that information, that would be helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Natasha. Councillor Crowder next.
That's right. Thank you, Chair. Just a one is more an observation followed by a couple of questions. The first one basically is, at the last meeting there, I'd been asking about police officers and their dogs, and I had a response to that, which was very welcome. I also note that through the press there that the dogs were also in action at the Ardgowan fishery, where 3 persons were apprehended. It's very welcome news. I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg, and dogs have actually been in duty more often. The questions really relate to the hate crime, and I was just wondering, is that done at a national level, or is there any input at a local level? I also welcome the large amount of drugs and cash that has been received. That obviously helps Inverclyde to be a much, much safer place. The other question really relates to missing persons. And I was wondering if there's any kind of trend there that the people who went missing, have they been found at other family members or friends' homes, or do many of them of the missing persons travel out with the Inverclyde area?
Yeah. Okay, so the police dogs, I was conscious of that update that you got, and actually I was really pleased with how many times the dogs have been deployed and the apprehensions that come with that. I would put my hands up if one of those dogs came running at me, I have to say. So yeah, we've got a great relationship with the dogs. Just don't clap them, and that'll just continue, to be honest with you. So brilliant relationship with them, brilliant relationship with the traffic department as well. The hate crime. So the hate crime. So I have a particular interest in hate crime because I previously had a role that looked at hate crime. So the 6.8% increase in our detection rate. So what happens with every hate crime that happens in Inverclyde is I personally review that. I review it every morning. As soon as I hear about an incident that's involving a hate crime, I review it and I monitor from start to finish what the outcome of that inquiry is. And if I'm not happy, I go back to the individual sergeants. I know it's officers that are doing the investigations, but I go back to the individual sergeants and tell them what I'm looking for. So 6.8% increase. I'm genuinely really happy with that. I want it to be better. And I'll keep plugging away at that. But is it a local or a national? It's local. It's absolutely local. It's our issue, and we'll do everything we can. Hate crime is not tolerated. So therefore, there's a complete focus on that by me as the area commander. The missing persons. So we're quite fortunate in Inverclyde, but we don't have that. We don't have huge numbers of missing people, but we still have a number that causes us concern. To be honest with you, it's really a mixture of where we find them. We do find them in family and friends' houses. We do find them. We had a missing person yesterday. We found that person in Stirling. It's a kind of a mix. To be honest with you, we have a number of children who run away from children homes and they'll go with their friends and stuff like this. What we do find is that the use of social media, and if you ever wondered why we do the social media for missing people, social media is absolutely fantastic for us, and we have found so many missing people using social media. I suppose it's the embarrassment factor for some people that they don't want to be seen on that as gone missing, but it definitely works. So, and again, that's a local approach. It works in Inverclyde. No intentions of changing that. We always ask the family about if they have any objections to us putting stuff on social media. So we always seek the family's permission before we do that. And that does work a treat. But yeah, we find them sometimes with our pals, some of their families. Sometimes we find them somewhere else in Scotland.
That's very nice, lovely. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, John. Okay, next, Councillor Jackson, please.
Thank you, Tommy. Tommy, I'd like to follow up on Councillor Murphy's question there. Nearly a quarter of sexual crimes reported were against young people. If we put that into numbers, 18 children in Inverclyde have been victims of sexual assault. Can I ask if these 18 children are on top of the 17 identified in the last meeting when we discussed the Bernardo's report into at-risk children. So are these 18 children who have been victims of sexual assault on top of the 17 identified in the last committee meeting in the Bernardo's report?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jackson. Paul, or I don't know, maybe if Ruth may have some information on that as well, but I'll ask Paul first.
Obviously I'm aware of the Bernardo's report now. However, what I'm not aware of is who these children are in the Bernardo's. It makes reference to a number in the Bernardo's report. I actually don't know who the children are, so it would be impossible for me to answer that at this time.
Can I come back? So, can I come back then? So we don't know if there's 18 children of theirs. Is this what we're told here? We don't know if 18 children or 55 children have been victims of sexual assault.
Okay. So if you look at the report period, so the report period for April to November, we are confirming 18 children, not 35. We're confirming 18. So that's the report that we've sent to you. So there's 18 that have been confirmed. The other 17 that you're talking about in the Bernardo's, I don't know the full circumstances round about those individuals, but what I can say is there's 18, not 35, for Inverclyde.
Okay, thanks, Alan. I think maybe if officers could, maybe yourself, Ruth, maybe liaise with Louise and Sharon Lang and maybe get some clarification on that and maybe write to Councillor Jackson and give him that information, if you don't mind. Colin, are you okay with that?
Yes, Tony, thanks for that. That'd be great.
Okay, councillors, do we have any other questions before we move on to the SFRS report? Okay, thank you. Move on to agenda item 3, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue report. David, are you presenting?
Convener, can I come in just to start away if you're okay with that, please, and I'll bring David in.
Yep, certainly, Jim, fire away.
Oh, brilliant, thanks, and good afternoon, Convener and colleagues. Just a few things from myself in terms of a kind of welcome and setting David up for the rest of the report. So I thought it was probably just a poignant time just to give you a wee update just on our kind of staffing position and how steady that has been over the piece around both absence and COVID. So what I can tell you is across the 3 local authority areas, we've actually only got 1 person shielding out of our staffing group of almost kind of 450 people, which is a really great result. And I guess that lays out the kind of foundations as we are still very much focused on that business as usual piece. We've got a really fantastic absence level as well. I think we're sitting around 4% for the Inverclyde area. And our operational posture around our RDS, our retained colleagues, is still sitting probably one of the best levels in Scotland. So our operational and resilience posture is really, really healthy, Convener and colleagues. But if I could just bring us back on to one of the points that Paul Cameron had mentioned there, and I think it shows a true bit of real close partnership working, not just with Police Scotland ourselves, but also the Council in terms of Opstel. So just a couple of facts and figures around there. So those events kicked off on the 14th and the 9th, run through to the 3rd and 11th in terms of the firebombing, and we stood down the major incident on the 1st of December. But during that really, really close synergy with all the key partners, we were able to identify and address 58 targeted locations, 359 engagements, direct engagement with residents, 258 joint safety information pact was issued, 79 home fire safety visits was carried out, and that's a real significant piece of joint work that absolutely provides that level of safety and a bit of kind of public reassurance back into the community of Greenock and the surrounding area. Convener, also, you know that we're due to come back with a refreshed local plan, and our intention, both Group Commander Macari and myself have been working on what a draft interim plan will look like for you, and our intention would be to present that to the next committee. That probably gives a very light touch review of what our current local plan is, and that will prepare for the services vision, which will be called the future vision, which will be ratified internally and then come back out for consultation externally. And that will set the parameters of where we need to put ourselves in terms of how we can get closer to delivering services to our communities. Probably around that timescale, there'll be a new framework document as well. And a great analogy I'll give you, the fire framework document is ministers kind of exam book for us, and the subsequent work that will go behind there will be a redraft of a strategic plan, which will be our answer to that question book. And because we will then undertake a new strategic plan, there will be a brand new local plan, and obviously we will be coming back and working closely with all partners to make sure that we map across our intentions directly back into what a new plan will be at that point in the future. I kind of watched and I read with real interest in some of the kind of facts and figures that was played out. It was actually in the Telegraph that we managed to get a wee look at around some of the demand that has probably been reported back in this scrutiny meeting and previous scrutiny meetings, and that's a real positive for me. And that's I'm going to be quite honest and frank. We've been very lucky that the number of people who are no longer working in some of these commercial premises has had a direct correlation back into a reduction on what we unwanted fire alarm signal. But what that has also given us the opportunity, taking that demand out has also reduced the number of blue light journeys we're actually undertaking to go to these unwanted fire alarm systems. The physical cost of both staff salaries and the wear and tear on the vehicles, but more importantly, and I've shared this at previous meetings, convener, the ability where, if you can imagine, if I shake up the chessboard around Inverclyde where I've got appliances moving about everywhere, falling up to go to unwanted fire alarm signals, and then there's something comes in of note, and there's somebody really needs us, then we can't have that immediate attack on that fire. So there's a number of things that David McCarry will touch upon when we come to the actual scrutiny report about how connected we are back into some national work around how we can do actually more in terms of removal of that demand, specifically around UFAS. And I'd just like to express my thanks to Councillor MacLeod just in terms of the support comments around the attacks and emergency workers. I totally agree, and that you have no idea the reassurance that has, knowing that we've got partners and colleagues who are on this call and right across Inverclyde who is giving the emergency services that level of support. So, convener, I just wanted to put on record just my thanks back to Councillor MacLeod. And if you're okay with that, convener, I'll pass you on to David, and David will go through the scrutiny report for us. And again, we'll take any questions at that time. Thanks, convener.
Okay, David.
That's great. Thank you, convener. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all safe and well. I know this second wave, if you like, has been particularly challenging for a lot of our staff personally. So I hope you're all well. I think, as the area commander highlighted there, it would be very easy for us to look at the Q3 stats as they have been and say everything's down, everything's great, but it's not how we conduct a business. We're absolutely mindful that as and when we get a normal return to business, that the partnerships that we've enjoyed in Inverclyde and the conversations that we've had continue just now, so that when we get back to a normal posture, we can build on what we're doing. If we look at the activity levels with regards to accidental dwelling fires, yes, it's at its lowest for 5 years. Yes, we have experienced the lowest figures, although we saw a spike, as you remember, earlier on in the quarters when people were at home more, and we did the national Make the Call campaign, and then we've seen that number steadily come down, which is good. And we've kept those conversations going in Inverclyde, with Riverclyde, with Oak Tree, with the Antisocial Behaviour Unit. And we've been able to get that information out to certain addresses. So, for example, 5 sets of fire retardant bedding have been delivered to different addresses through a stream provided through Riverclyde Homes. One of our community safety advocates has made contact or recontacted with the new lead for the homeless unit, who have access to about 80 satellite properties, and some of those addresses, for whatever reason, have come up on our instant data. So he has made contact with them. We are looking to, under a normal posture, not only make access to those properties to carry out a risk assessment in conjunction with local authority partners, but also be able to look at the individuals who are in managing those properties. So it could be people that are in these properties who have particular challenges around their life. It may be on release from prison. It's to take them from that satellite flat into a full lease of the property, a full rental. So there's a lot of work going on in the background there. In terms of the casualties, there is that direct correlation across to being only 2, so low figures again, and it's important that we've made sure that community action team mailbox, where our referrals come in from partners about anyone that may be vulnerable following a fire, or in case a fire happens. That's now staffed 7 days a week. It's 24/7. So we make sure that anything that comes into us that we can deploy. Things that have happened as a result of that, and we can talk about operational tail. We have issued things like letterbox blockers. You know, if people were worried about security or anything being poured through the front door, we've been able to do that as well. So that figure is low, but it's, as I say, it's important that we don't sort of rest on our laurels there. Unintentional injury and harm. A lot of our engagement, our good engagement work around road safety, around water safety, around home safety happens within the education environment, and we are mindful that engagement hasn't been able to take place under its normal format because we've not been able to get into schools. They've obviously had their own challenges in terms of maintaining that education of young people, but it doesn't mean that we haven't done anything. My crew commander within the community action team has spoke with colleagues in education today. They have had a chat around, rather than us delivering that presentation remotely, you know, it's about maybe the young people making that content themselves, delivering it to their own classmates, so giving them some life skills as well in terms of public speaking, and our community action team would come into those sessions and provide a bit of support and guidance and mentoring for them. So there's many ways in which we can deliver those safety messages, because we'd see them as the common thread running through communities, that if we can get that message embedded within our young people, then they're the people that can carry and assist us with that. Around Q3, we bonfire and fireworks input, that was delivered remotely, and the relevant details were sent out to both the primary schools and the high schools, and that consisted of a training module, lesson plan notes, a video presentation, a leaflet and a link to Go Safe Scotland. So like I say, it'd be easy for myself and the area commander to sit here and say that trend will continue, but it's really important that we make sure that not only do we aspire to make things better post-COVID, but we need to make sure that we're still engaging in some way during this and not just accept that, that things are doing well. Deliberate fire settings, the one area where we saw an increase, and yes, we did see an increase with regards to Operation Tail, but it wasn't solely because of that. We have seen an increase around the Arts Guild, some fly tipping and bin fires, and it's important for our community action team at that stage to find out who are the relevant people to speak to. Around a particular street in Green between the 2nd of November and the 2nd of December are 6 wheelie bin fires. That information is shared with the Police Scotland Local Authority Liaison Officer and also the community wardens, and I know Roisin's on the call and very supportive of the work we do and very quick to deploy and assist us where we can, and we're always eternally grateful from that. Clune Park continues to be a challenge for us, but again, we've worked closely with the local authority and we absolutely understand the challenges that they've had around Clune Park. Unfortunately, on the 28th of November, we had a firefighter injury there, a shoulder injury, and spent some time off the work just because of the physical challenges that site has. But to give the committee some concept of the challenges that we have, we also have things called urban explorers, a new term that I hadn't heard, that we actually have people who are trying to enter not just Clune Park but buildings of this type that are lying derelict to film themselves and go on. So that again presents a different challenge. So Martin, who's on the call, has provided us a live document which shows us the tenancies, the occupancies, and what premises within Clune Park are occupied, and that's really important for us, because as and when we are deployed in an operational instant, the instant commander can look at that and it will give them as much as they can an idea of which flats may or may not be occupied, and then they can deploy their resources as they see fit. This Urban Explorers gives us another factor into that, but it is a very difficult environment for us, but we're more than aware of the challenges around bonfire night itself. Yes, we had a near miss within Port Glasgow where there was firefighters actually set alight within a car. They were in the boot of the car, so that, you know, a car fire presents its own challenges, but when you put fireworks in it, it really does give us a challenge with our firefighters. So that was recorded as a near miss, and there was an act of violence within the Gourock area, and that was basically used throwing missiles at the appliance. One bot was retrieved from the scene and later assisted police in identifying one 14-year-old who was charged, I believe, under the Emergency Workers Act. Just to reiterate, with regards to deliberate fire setting, operational tail, as well as the fire retardant bedding, we really deployed very quickly here, and I'm really grateful to the police and colleagues within the local authority. And I know, convener, you were briefed throughout by the area commander but the amount of engagement that was done in such a short space of time during the restrictions was fantastic. Police were very quick to share information with us, and they trusted us with that, and that's a good thing. You know, over 360 premises engaged with, and a joint information pact around crime prevention and fire safety was brought together in such a quick period of time, and we were able to deploy quite flexibly. And we still carried out during the quarter 212 home fire safety visits, with only about 16 that were declined or premises that we couldn't get into. In terms of our non-domestic fire safety, the numbers here are low. You know, when we talk about percentages, that's great, but we only had 2 fires, and we are mindful that premises aren't open during this time, but we have to make sure that as and when they have a fire. So I think there was a fire down at Cost Cutter. We also had the Campbell Street fire as well. So if that's a derelict building, then we identify the duty holder to go and secure it. If it's an occupied building, we will deploy our enforcement officers to go and carry out that post-domestic support, post-incident support, and that audit. But the numbers here are low, but we are mindful that the businesses are closed. We also carried out 2 HMO audits. We completed an audit at Greenock Morton to allow the football season to go ahead, so supporting business there as well, and a new audit carried out at a new care premises within Bridge of Weir. In terms of UFAS, again, UFAS generally are caused by people. We've seen a reduction here to the lowest figure for 5 years, but this still the top reporters will remain the same: residential care, hospitals, and the education environment. We have started some early conversations with our colleagues within the local authority in education about looking to do something around UFAS. Those conversations are in their early stages, but very positive. You know, it's important that we not only look to reduce our demand around UFAS, but if we can look at our education sector and possibly find a solution that stops the disruption to our young people's education, then now could be a positive time for us. So we have a meeting scheduled next month, and hopefully, depending on how that goes, we can come back to committee and give you an update on that. It's important to note here that the service nationally has a UFAS Champions Forum, and they are working towards the tail end of this year to look at how the service responds to UFAS, if there's something they can do, and there's a number of options within there. I'm pleased to say that I've managed to secure 2 Inverclyde officers onto that, both one of my enforcement officers and one of the operational officers, so we've got a good spread of information. So I want to make sure that our voice is absolutely heard at that table, and anything that's coming out from the centre is immediately fed back to me so that we can take that and run with it. Convener, that's me at the end of the report. I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, David. I know I've got Councillor MacLeod on the phone, and I see Councillor Crowther's got a couple of comments. Does anybody else want to ask any questions after that? If you could let me know before I go to Councillor MacLeod. Councillor Crowther.
That's fine, thank you, Chair. It really comes under the water rescue, and it's under the unintentional injury and harm, and it's just the incident at the Murdison Dam. And it's just to say that I'll be making inquiries as to what the council policy is in respect of dams when they are drained. As we know, when they're drained, there's a large area of mud is usually exposed, and in this instance, the dog that ran onto the mud and the adult that tried to rescue it ended up having to be rescued themselves. So it's just to ensure that the council at least put notices up advising people not to go into the mud. Whether they listen to it or not is another matter, but as I said there, it's really just an observation rather than a question.
Okay, thanks, John. David, anything to add?
Yeah, just Councillor Crowther, thanks for that. Stephen Muldoon from the Coast Guard has been in discussion with Mark Meehan, and he has highlighted this, not only the rescue that was carried out with regards to the dog, but also just people wading in shallow mud, if you want to call it that. So he has flagged that as a concern, and that discussion is ongoing with them. So it is something that's been raised with us. But thanks for that.
That's brilliant. That's lovely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Hugh, would you like to add something here?
Yeah, just for yourself, Convener, just to let you know that we're aware of this, and we've been speaking to our colleagues in the Roads Department. We're putting out community safety messages about the dam, and working very closely with the Roads Department to make sure it was a fault that we had to do to clear the dam out, and there was a burst pipe in it. So that's the issue. But it is community safety messages have been sent out to the corporate management team.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. Okay, if there's no other questions from members present, I'll go to Councillor MacLeod on the phone. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. Yeah, can I just say thanks to the fire service again for a good report. I think it's very encouraging to see that there's been a big decrease in in fires across the board. I wish all your staff well, as I do all the emergency staff at this time, and I hope that your firefighter who was injured at Cowan Park, I hope he's feeling much better now. Please pass on my best wishes to him. It is a worrying thing. Cowan Park's actually on my ward, and over the years we've seen a fair number of fires in Cowan Park, and it does continue to concern me, particularly when there are still some people living there. Indeed, I'm dealing with a constituent just now who describes very grim conditions that he's having to live under. But I'm dealing with that just now. But yeah, a good report. The only one thing, and you mentioned yourself, where there's a bit of a blight, is regarding the deliberate fire setting. It was only a small increase over the past year of 5%, but nonetheless it was an increase in a 20% increase over the last 3 years, and that's very worrying, because I know yourselves and the police and others do a lot of work with Hugh Scott and CLD in the schools, and I know the schools have been off quite a bit over the past year, but I know you've done a lot of work previously around education and trying to put a positive message about not doing these type of things. So it is concerning that that's still occurring, and indeed it's increased. I just wondered if you've got any ideas why it's increased. Is anybody been caught who's said why they're doing it? Is it just hijinks or what it is? If you've got any intel on that, thanks.
Thanks, Jim. David?
I think these things can come quite sporadically, and I'm always keen to stress that whilst we do see peaks, particularly during the summer out of school time, I don't necessarily see young people as the problem. Probably they're the resource that we can tap into to help solve the issue. In fact, I think the last individual that was apprehended for deliberate fire setting was 40. The last time I checked, I wasn't a young person, although I do still consider myself a young person. But you take my point. It can be very easy for us sometimes to point the finger at a particular age group, but actually, if we can get into the hearts and minds of those individuals through those engagement with young people, then absolutely that is the challenge. But as I say, unfortunately, with deliberate fire setting, whether it's in the summer in the more grass and heathland, or whether it's through, like I mentioned, the wheelie bin fires, sometimes these can be quite short, sharp periods of activity, and by the time you've actually had those conversations on a daily basis, it's almost come to a stop, because in some cases it can happen over the course of a night, and by which time it's finished, but it sits in those statistics. But I hope when you hear colleagues and police talking here, and council officers and colleagues within education and Roisin and our entire team, I hope you take some comfort that actually the relationships are there, and when we see something more major, like we did with Opstel within Inverclyde, we can deploy very quickly and effectively.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I just say that we know a vast majority of our young people are well behaved and they're model citizens. But I just wondered if perhaps and it's very interesting to hear that one of the people you actually caught was 40-year-old. That's very sad, I think. But yeah, thanks for that feedback. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Okay, thanks, David and Jim, and we'll move on now to agenda item 4, which is Local Police and Fire Scrutiny Committee update report. Yeah, I think Ian Hanley's going to present this. Ian?
Yes, Convener, thank you much. Good afternoon, committee. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of this report is to update the committee on current and emerging issues relating to police and fire and rescue services. The report includes an update of the recent publication of the independent review of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing, and also seeks approval of a response to the Scottish Parliament's Justice Subcommittee on Policing, Police Scotland's use of remote piloted aircraft systems and body-worn video cameras. Section 4 of your report provides updates from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, noting the recent publication of statistics for the year 2019-20, with a selection of statistics relevant to Finn Clyde at 4.1 of your paper. Members should note that these specific statistics have been considered due to its inclusion within the Inverclyde Local Fire Plan. Section 4.2 provides a brief update in regards to fire and rescue and the Grenfell Power fire tragedy, and should also be considered along with the update from the Scottish Government in the 8.1 of your paper. Section 6 provides updates with regards to the Scottish Police Authority, with links to mental health demanded policing at 6.1, the Audit Scotland report by the Auditor General at 6.2, and updates from the Policing Performance Committee. Included are links to papers where members have previously expressed interest regarding policing matters within Inverclyde. Section 7 and 9 of your report provides two pieces of business which I'd like to draw your attention to. Section 7 provides members with an update of the independent review of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing. At the committee meeting of September 17, 2020, members formally approved our response to a consultation request from the Independent Review Secretariat, and this was considered in the final review chaired by the Right Honourable Dame Leash Angelini. That final report makes some 81 recommendations, but specifically to the role of local scrutiny committees. Recommendation 33 notes that local scrutiny committees should consider, in consultation with Police Scotland's local divisional commanders and the Causa Police Scrutiny Conveners Forum, what further complaints, information or discussions would assist with scrutiny of the police. Appendix 1 of item provides members with that substantive section in respect of local scrutiny committees. As noted at section 7.3, council officers have discussed the report recommendation with the Secretariat of the Causa Police Scrutiny Conveners Forum regarding the potential implications for any scrutiny arrangements across Inverclyde and Scotland. As that forum has yet not met this year to consider recommendations, it's recommended that our members note the content of the final report and will accept an update at a final, at a future committee meeting. I should note for members' information that the primacy of the Policing Fast Scotland Act of 2012 includes a requirement for Police Scotland to provide information on complaints about the police service within Inverclyde. Finally, section 9 of your report is in relation to a consultation request from the Parliament's Justice Subcommittee on Policing in respect of remote piloted aircraft systems and body-worn cameras. As always, my thanks to members for their views and their assistance in this matter, particularly due to the quick response time out with the committee timetable. As noted, the subcommittee on policing is considering how Police Scotland currently makes use of remote piloted aircraft systems, also known as drones, and body-worn video cameras. The submission of this committee is appended at Appendix 2, and the paper also includes a link for correspondence between the Justice Subcommittee on Policing, Scottish Police Authority and Police Scotland. If I may provide a brief update to this, though this will be formally tabled at our next meeting of the committee, John Finney, MSP, the convener of that Justice Subcommittee on Policing, has written to both Police Scotland and the Scottish Police Authority following the subcommittee meeting on the 18th of January 2021, seeking clarification on a number of issues with a formal response sought by tomorrow. Again, this will be updated at our next committee meeting. This concludes the report, and members are asked of the following: to note the current and emerging issues relating to police and firing related matters, to note the content of the independent review of complaints handling, investigations and misconduct issues in relation to policing, and agrees to accept a further update report following the meeting of the Causa Police Scrutiny Conveners Forum. And finally, to approve the response to the Scottish Parliament's Justice Subcommittee on Policing of Police Scotland's use of remote piloted aircraft systems and body-worn cameras. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian, for that comprehensive report. I'll come to Councillor MacLeod on the phone and then Councillor Moran. Jim, do you have any questions to ask?
Yeah, Tommy, it's not so much a question, it's Well, maybe as a question, but it's more of a comment and an observation. On page 16, 6.3, about Policing Performance Committee, it talks about naloxone delivery steering group update and how it's been decided by Police Scotland that there'll be 3 pilot areas, C Division Falkirk, D Division Dundee City and G Division Glasgow East were selected as the 3 pilot areas. Some people will maybe know that Liz Robertson, the group leader for the SNP group, is and myself and others in the group were a bit taken aback that, you know, Inverclyde wasn't selected ahead of Falkirk. Can understand Dundee and Glasgow as having been chosen with the drug issues that both cities have, but certainly with Inverclyde, with the terrible record that we have here in Inverclyde, we would have hoped that we would have been particularly chosen ahead of Falkirk as being one of the pilot areas for naloxone delivery going out to our police officers. But nonetheless, it's good that that this is happening. As we know, I think the fire service already doing this, and indeed it's getting rolled out amongst many organisations within the third sector. So it is positive in trying to tackle and try and prevent a number of drug deaths that's occurring. So it is positive, but it was disappointing that Inverclyde certainly wasn't chosen to be amongst the 3 pilot areas.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I take your point on that. I'm not familiar with the internal machinations of the Police Scotland. I don't even know if David or Paul are either, but I'm sure we could get a response back to you, if not today, via email. Paul or David, would you like to respond to Councillor MacLeod's point?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I can probably just give the assurance that there was data analysis done on a number of grounds to try and select 3 areas. Part of that selection has been based not just on, I suppose, number of drug-related incidents, but also to provide a variation across Scotland in terms of local demographics and also the number of officers that have to be trained, etc. So that's been part of that. I understand your comments, absolutely. If it was me, or if I suppose I couldn't speak on behalf of the Chief, but I think the Chief is keen to get these pilots running as quickly as possible. And from my perspective, I would love to, and I hope in due course to be introducing that in Inverclyde should the pilot move to roll out, and that'll be a decision for the Chief Constable. But absolutely, you'll have my commitment if we can look at drug-related deaths. I know the level that we're facing locally. If we can do anything, not just about naloxone, but looking at other mechanisms too, between the police, council, and other partners, then we'll do everything we can.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Okay, Councillor Moran, and then I think David McCarry's got a comment as well he'd like to make. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. I think we discussed the point I was going to bring up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robert. David, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just in the back of what Councillor MacLeod was saying, just to clarify the position that SFR currently inhabit, that whilst we have widespread acknowledgement and awareness about the anti-opioid naloxone, we do not routinely carry it on our appliances or within our trauma bags. So that's not the position that we're at, that we would deploy to administer it. I'm not to say that wouldn't happen in the future, but just to clarify the current position, we're not at that stage yet.
Okay, thanks very much for that, David. So there's no more questions in the chat box, so can we agree on the recommendations, members? Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 5, which I think is Tony's going to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll hand over to Chief Inspector Harvey. She'll discuss her report. And can I just remind members, this is a sensitive subject and we do have responsibilities regarding identifying persons or incidents, so please bear that in mind with your questions, please. Tony.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of this report is to present a report by Police Scotland regarding child sexual exploitation and human trafficking in Inverclyde. It was agreed at the last committee in November that this report was provided in respect of the national report, which has been noted already at the meeting of the Health and Social Care Committee on the 7th of January 2021. We're asking members to note the report.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Chief Inspector Harvey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chair, for the introduction. I'll address Councillor Jackson's question and Councillor Murphy's question first before I go on to the report, if that's okay. The Councillor Jackson's question regarding if it's the same figures or if it's an additional number that we're talking about in the current report that's set out, it was just to highlight, I will contact you by email, but just now to say the figures discussed and set out in the Bernardo's report are taken from a different time span. The figures from this report that we've discussed today and that Chief Superintendent Duncan went over is contained within our latest reporting period, and also the Bernardo's report and figures consider different factors, including looking at and considering the vulnerabilities that lie alongside sexual exploitation and not just evidenced and recorded crimes. And I move on to Councillor Murphy's question regarding the under-16s and whether that's directly related to children being in the house more because of lockdown and our current COVID situation. It's just important to note there the context of that figure. The figure incorporates contact and non-contact offending, and importantly, it's a mix of non-recent and recent inquiries. And we have a significant inquiry on the go just now within the Child Abuse Investigation Unit, which actually are non-recent. So it's now adults making reports from when they were children. So yeah, absolutely still horrific, but not currently related to the COVID situation or children being in their house. There is an element of that, and we do have a small increase in cyber-related incidents where children being contacted online because they are online more through lockdown. And we've also have a few inquiries of current under-16s disclosing sexual crime within a peer group setting, which we will address. Our Child Abuse Unit work tirelessly every day to address them. So it's just to take that context in, that those reported under-16s within the current period, there's no identified direct correlation between lockdown and the COVID situation and young people being sexually assaulted. And I will move on then to my report that I was asked to prepare by the outgoing Divisional Commander, Mr Murray, and it's regarding the current situation in Inverclyde with child sexual exploitation and human trafficking. So I've put, obviously the report was circulated prior to the meeting and it has the national definitions within, which I don't propose to go over. What's important for me is the work that we do as a partnership within Inverclyde regarding the prevention and protection of our young people and the interventions that we have. And the main way we do that is through our Vulnerable Young Persons Group. The Divisional Public Protection Unit, of which I am the head of, along with my colleagues in Education, Health and Social Work Services, work closely at the Vulnerable Young Persons Group to identify and discuss those that may be vulnerable to sexual exploitation. And it's important to note that where a young person is referred to the Young Persons Operations Group for discussion, it's done on the basis of risk and professional judgment and doesn't necessarily indicate that there's definitive evidence of CSE having taken place. We put and bring children forward to the meeting so that it gives us, as a multi-agency approach, to consider and share information relative to the safeguarding and of the young people and any disruption in investigative opportunities that may exist within a multi-agency format, which would actually prevent the vulnerable young people being involved in child sexual exploitation. So even though I have put in the report that 17 young people were discussed at the Vulnerable Young Persons Group, within the last 3 years, not all of those children have actually been victim of CSE, and I've put that note in there for that purpose. It's a basis of a risk and professional judgment and doesn't indicate that there's definitive evidence of CSE. The current picture in Inverclyde at the moment is we have no information or actionable intelligence within Inverclyde that gives us significant concern around child sexual exploitation. I work closely every day with my colleagues in health, social work and education to make sure that any information and safeguarding that's required is done immediately. We'll never become complacent when it comes to the safety of children, and while we have no information or intelligence to substantiate the concerns that were raised at the previous meeting, I would welcome any information, and I would appeal to you as the elected members. You have a better reach possibly in the community than I do or my colleagues do, to your constituents, to your colleagues. If they have any information that we could act on, investigate, develop, then we absolutely 100% will, in line with our colleagues, a multi-agency approach or a single agency approach if it's appropriate where there's a crime being established. With regards to human trafficking, the picture in Inverclyde is similar to that for CSE in that we currently have no information or actionable intelligence within Inverclyde that raises any significant concern. We've reviewed the local data over the last 3 years, and there have been 3 investigations that have been carried out where the victim has been identified within Inverclyde, and significant inquiry has been carried out around that to see where that potentially trafficked person has came from, which will carry out CCTV inquiries house to house and a number of witness inquiries to see where the vulnerable person has come from, and if there's anything we can do regarding criminality into who is trafficking individuals into the country. I won't go through the whole report, as I believe you've all hopefully all read it, but I'm happy if the chair if there's any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Lee. I had one question for myself, which you've kind of answered at the end there, regarding, as you'll be aware, when we discover these cannabis farms, there's foreign nationals who have been working on them. And my concern, my question for you, I was looking for assurances that Police Scotland investigate this fully, the immigration status of the individuals who've been apprehended, and also even down to the detail of where they stay, who they were staying with, where they're receiving housing benefit, was somebody else receiving housing benefit, and I'm looking for assurances that investigation does take place, and obviously it'll lead where it leads, but it's just that from my point of view, from Quebec's point of view, we would like assurances that they're fully investigated.
No, thanks, Chair, for the question, and I can answer that. There's two pronged to an inquiry as such when we uncover the cannabis cultivation that you're referring to, or indeed any potential victim of human trafficking who comes to our attention through alerting a member of the public in the street. The first thing we do is the victim-centred approach. So regardless of what they have or haven't been involved in, i.e. the cannabis cultivations, we are very astute to the fact that they have probably been trafficked into the country. They won't have they won't have any documentation. They're vulnerable by the fact that what they've been asked to do and how they've arrived in the country. So we always treat them as a victim-centred approach alongside any criminal inquiry that is carried out. So the cannabis cultivation, the criminal inquiry into that is fully carried out. Every inquiry, investigative opportunity is exhausted, including right down to telecoms work that would get done to see who and who hadn't been within locality around that. A lot of intelligence, with dedicated intelligence officers within public protection who carry out those work, and it would be also DWP housing checks to see who has any association, who's in contact with who. We do a lot of inquiry in the background regarding that, and we don't leave any stone unturned. We also do a further inquiry to see where the potential victim of human trafficking has came from. So I could give you an example of one that was a potential victim of human trafficking who was located in the street and wasn't involved in any criminality or no suggestion of it. We take that inquiry as from that point and see where has that person came from. So we do CCV inquiry, we track them to the train, we do the train inquiry to track them from where they've come. We do everything we absolutely can so that we can feed that back into the centre, who have the central human trafficking unit, to see if we can secure that intelligence for them that looks at the bigger picture for Scotland and indeed Britain, to see where the victims of human trafficking are actually being brought into the country.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. I'm going to come to Councillor Jackson and then Councillor Moran. Colin, questions?
Thanks, Tommy. Tommy, you actually asked the questions I was going to ask, but if I can just maybe ask Sorry, there's a wee bit of interference. The incident at Port Glasgow, they confirmed that the person involved was for a Vietnamese national of their immigration status. And do we have any information on the 60-year-old involved? Where they were from?
So, sorry, Councillor, you did break up a bit there, but I think I've got your questions. If I haven't, get back to me. So the first was about where were the Vietnamese nationals? Is that the question?
Yes, it was. It's reported that the 40-year-old was a Vietnamese national. So I suppose the question is to know the immigration status of this national. And another question was, there's a 16-year-old child involved. What do we know about him? His nationality, was he local? Was he a foreign national?
So yeah, so both foreign nationals and both Vietnamese immigrants, and the 40-year-old that you're talking about, yes, didn't have an official immigration status within the country, and that will get looked at along with our immigration colleagues. Regarding the 16-year-old, we've obviously assessed, due to the his liaison with the Vietnamese interpreter, that he is 16, and because we don't know, no birth certificate, we don't know the exact age, history or detail of the young person. So we are treating him along with our social services colleagues as a child. He's been accommodated as such and he's been looked after as such.
Can I go back in, Tommy?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, absolutely. But I really, we're maybe straying too close to the bone with specific racial investigations, but I'm happy to.
I fully understand that, Tommy. It's just, I'm reading the report, and the report says there is currently no information or actionable intelligence within Inverclyde that raises significant concerns around human trafficking. Yet, no, a child without a birth certificate is evidence of child trafficking.
Colin, you're very, very difficult here. You're breaking up there. I still interference in the background. Could you maybe repeat that?
Convener, perhaps with your permission, Councillor Jackson, I think the DCI Harvey has been very helpful and has indicated that she would be willing to email you directly in relation to these matters, and perhaps your sort of very specific inquiries could be sort of directed to DCI Harvey, if DCI Harvey is happy with that.
With all due respect, my comment is on something which is an actual report. And it is that there is no current information with actionable intelligence within Inverclyde that raises concerns. But we're told that we have a 16-year-old birth certificate.
No.
So that inquiry was currently already underway when I put this report together. So current intelligence, current information or actionable intelligence within Inverclyde doesn't relate to that incident, because we already knew about that incident. I'm talking about in my report information or actionable intelligence that we can investigate inquiries where we don't know the specifics of the information and require an inquiry team to get into it and develop it. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about actionable intelligence. When this report was put together, the incident at Port Glasgow was already known, and we were already had all our information and intelligence that we required in a full inquiry into a 14, 16-year-old.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. Colin, I'm happy to take a question, but I'm not going to say specific incidents. I think we've had enough information, and I'm sure Chief Inspector Harvey will be happy to answer any questions offline or via email. Do you have anything else you want to come back with? Did you get that, Colin?
Sorry, Tommy, I didn't hear you.
No, I just said, well, don't want. I'm not wanting to go into specifics about anything that's been mentioned already. But I'm happy to take any general questions. But I'm sure that Chief Inspector Harvey will respond to any other specific questions on any specific inquiry via email or by telephone if you want to do that. But do you have any further general questions?
It's absolutely fine, Tommy. I just think it's quite concerning. We have a 16-year-old child without a birth certificate, but yet the report, I know we're talking about actionable intelligence, but we're consistently told there's no incidents of trafficking within Inverclyde, but we've got a 16-year-old child without a birth certificate from Vietnam. I just think it's quite concerning, but I've nothing else to add, Tommy. I'll take it offline. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Colin. Councillor Moran.
We're talking about intelligence. You know, we've seen a lot on, I suppose, the television thing of incidents of grooming taking place, and certainly, if you happen to see we're living on the ground, we're part of the community. If we were to see any evidence or something that looked very suspect, and we thought was grooming taking place, would we be quite right to contact the police and tell them of our concerns and see if there would be a follow-up investigation or certainly look at the situation? Because I think that's part of the problem, is that intelligence, people will be trying to come forward, but you can see, I've seen myself, that there is incidents where you think something not right here. You know, so would the police take that on board if somebody to come, you're a private, the wrong chances, I don't like here, would you look at it? Would the police take it on board to investigate that threat, if it was what it could appear to be a threat?
Thanks, Robert. Louise?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that is genuinely a plea to any member of the public or their constituents. We're never going to know unless we're never going to be able to develop intelligence unless we know about it. So any suspicion, something that's just not right. I say quite a lot at our vulnerable young people's group that the intelligence that we get from our colleagues in education who see something that's just not right, perhaps in the playground or even a snippet of information that they have heard, they report that into us so that we can look at it, we look at all the systems and look at any correlation with anybody else or any like car registration number. So what my ask would be, let us decide and develop it. If we know about it, at least we can do something about it. And if there's nothing in it, then we can reassure the community that we're doing everything we can to take it seriously. But yeah, anything that would be reported into the police through 101, through Crime Stoppers, or you can report online as well. There's so many different ways that information would come into the Public Protection Unit and allow us to look at it and, if necessary, develop the information.
Thank you very much. Yes, aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Councillor Quinn and then Councillor Murphy. Louise, I think there's some background coming for you. If you maybe mute your mic, please. Sorted. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. Yeah, Louise, I've just got a question around cyber-based exploitation. It's just something that's came up quite a lot about our young people maybe getting drafted into sharing images, or which starts off as sharing an image between two children really in this scenario, and then it becomes shared wider. So I actually noticed that a new unit's been set up in Police Scotland for in effect cybercrime, which it said it's actually going to look at child sex abuse and sharing of indecent images. I think it's more about how we're going to get the information out there. First of all, with a couple of examples, which I'm not going into detail, but the young person, first of all, didn't know they're a victim. They've shared an image and potentially that image has been shared on, but they didn't know at that stage that they were actually a victim. But secondly, more children involved with the sharing of that image. I don't think that they understood that they were actually committing a crime by passing it on. So this is something that's becoming really, really frequent, I think, among the that, you know, obviously young people are involved in the cyber world. That's where most of them live and hang out and have most of their social life. So it's really just a kind of reassurance that that is something that's maybe been tackled, and how we're going to get that information down to our young people. Thanks.
Yeah, Lynn, thank you for the question. So yeah, there is the new unit that's looking nationally at that, and it feeds outwards to us locally to look at any information that they receive in regarding it. The sharing of images has become more prevalent over the last couple of years. It's not specific to lockdown. I just wanted to note that it's not specific to lockdown. It has been more prevalent over the last few years. And what we had started to do prior to lockdown was we had a team into the schools along with colleagues in education and with awareness raising sessions regarding keeping safe online. We were also targeting parents' nights as well to see if parents had any questions for us. Because the schools are closed, we're trying to think a bit more out the box about how we're going to deliver that. And what we're looking at, but we've not got anything finalised yet, is a few things. One was an online question and answer session, almost like Ask the Police. So directed at parents if they had any concern about their young person's online profile or their reach, and that they could come on and ask. So either myself or one of my DIs, this is an indicator that I've seen. Is it indicative of anything? What can I do? And get circulation out through social media about websites that parents and carers can go onto to look to see how they can keep their own children safe online by putting controls on and looking out for even personal behaviour of kids if they have shared an image and they now know it's circulating viral, and they now at the quiet of they change their own habits. So instead of the parents thinking, are they just being a moody teenager? Is there anything else, something behind that? So getting parents to think about how their children are presenting, and also we're looking at ways of getting that out there because the schools are currently shut.
Thanks, Louise. Lynn, have you anything else you want to come back on?
No, I think that's reassuring that stuff there, because it is a concern. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we'll come to Councillor Murphy, and then if there's nobody else, I'll come to Councillor MacLeod on the phone. Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of my questions have been asked by fellow colleagues, but I did kind of have something around the increase in the cyber abuse of children, and it was more so along the lines of our children have been online for the best part of a decade now, if not slightly longer, and I find it difficult to believe that children don't know that actually sharing indecent images of one another is a crime, because I've been part of youth groups, I've been in schools and stuff over the years, and that is something that is actually taught, is the fact that first of all, like, you need to be careful where you're sharing your images, but also the fact that once you send that on, that can go anywhere. And I believe the police were involved in that in the past. But I do think that there's some work that needs to be done, possibly between the education part of the council and also the police service, to actually equip parents, because parents ultimately are going to be at home when their parents are on these devices, being, whether it's catfished or being abused or being exploited in some way. So I think that possibly if there's a way of creating a toolkit or something, I know that we're using a lot of online platforms now to deliver education, so I don't know if there's something like that on one of them already, but I do think that this is something that we need to be looking into more, because ultimately our young people, this is not something new, this is not a new arena for them, and if it is increasing during lockdown, that would suggest that there's some education that really needs to be done, and it needs to be done right now. It can't wait, because the longer we leave it, the more young people are going to get exploited, and we don't know where that will go as we start to open up, as we start to hopefully come out of this lockdown. And we don't want to hear reports of anybody being sexually abused, never mind our children. So I suppose that was more a comment rather than a question, but I would like to hear something back on what we're going to proactively be doing to equip parents and raise awareness amongst our young people and children.
I'll bring in Ruth on that, and then maybe Louise.
Yes, it's a very good point, and certainly through the lockdown, our children are spending longer online. So actually, we're aware of the digital world becoming children spending more time in front of screens, and the difficulty of parents policing that. So we met with Chief Inspector Cameron, and the head teachers, and we wondered about a type of campaign similar to the Do You Know campaign that we previously launched, a joint campaign, and I know corporate communications are going away to look at some of that, because it's actually, do you know where your child is online, was the idea we came up, and so that's been mocked up just now.
Well, thanks, Ruth. Louise, would you like to add anything else? You're on mute, Louise.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. No, just I'll add two things very briefly. Our National Safer Communities Department is currently looking, along with our national partners at a national level, a web-based platform to get that information out there and to parents. So it's going to be for parents and for children, and it'll be either it'll be interactive, plus it'll have relevant links to different things that parents may or may not be concerned about. And the second one was, we are working closely with social work and education just now regarding the introduction of a new forum. So it's something that's quite straightforward, but feeds into a lot of the questions about how we get the information into the police. So there's a new form that's filled out. It's easy to fill out, and we'll have a bespoke email address at Public Protection that will start. And then instead of phoning 101 and possibly waiting a period of time for an operator and then it filtering through to PPU eventually, that information comes in directly to the PPU and allows us to action it in quick time.
Thanks, Louise. Natasha, would you like to come back?
Yes, I just want to say thanks to Ruth and Louise for saying what's hopefully going to be going ahead. I look forward to hearing about that. I was just going to bring up actually the 101, because that is something that I've had a few complaints about, is the fact that people are waiting long periods of time to get through to 101. But the fact there's going to be alternatives for that, it should hopefully ease that problem slightly if people have that information there. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. And lastly, I'll come to Councillor MacLeod on the phone. Jim, any questions?
No, I think a lot of questions have been, comments that have been made already answer anything I would have raised. Thanks, Tommy.
Okay, thanks. So, members, can we agree the recommendation of the report? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes today's meeting. And as always, thank you for your attendance and thank you for your positive contributions. Thank you.
Thanks everybody.